Hello, I am Brian Foster, bringing to you a Wander in the Spirit Land. I'm talking about how Spiritism interprets the wonderful book of Wander in the Spirit Land by the spirit Franchezzo, by the medium Farnese. Now, this book was done about the end of the 19th century. It's about this Franchezzo, who was a very smart, intelligent, moved in high circles. He wasn't much of a believer, but he became a believer when he died and went to the other side. And of course, he died and he fell in love with this woman, and he died just as he kind of met her and they were together. And she has been helping him rise up in the spirit world. This is the previous chapters all have been about he went from the lower zone and below to rise up, become a better person, get rid of the primitive emotions, hate, envy, jealousy, and he became a much better person. Now he's in this colony, probably in the high part of the lower zone, probably not in heaven completely, because it says the light's still a bit dim, but it's much brighter than it was before. He had met his father in the previous chapters, and his father asked him to go down into what he called hell, but we call the dark abyss. It's a type of purgatory. You're not there forever. So before I forget, please, if you're interested in Spiritism, go to my blog site, nwspiritism.com, and I have my book, Spiritism 101, The Third Revelation, and you can get that in Kindle, paperback, or Audible, but also it's available free in PDF. So if you're interested in Spiritism, please read that book. It's free PDF. It's also in French. I have other books in French. Look on my website. I have The Problem is a Solution in French on PDF. And I also have How to Live Inner Peace with Spiritism in English and French. And that's also in Kindle and paperback in the French also. So you may enjoy that. So please read Spiritism 101. It gives you a good introduction, a good survey of it. And then your next book, if you want to get deeper into it, should be the Spirits book by Allan Kardec. He codified Spiritism in the 1850s. And you can read all about that and how he codified that in my book, Spiritism 101. And it's this is really made a huge difference in my life. So now, let's go to Wander in the Spirit Land, chapter 16. Let me bring this up a little bit larger. There we go. This is called Clairvoyance, The Journey Begun. Okay, I'll read. The friend whom Arizaman sent to accompany and instruct me. Now, Arizaman was kind of his spirit mentor. Wasn't his guardian angel per se, but as you know, it's like you have a mentor at work, you maybe have a direct supervisor. Same thing in spirit world. There's all sorts of people to help you. Appeared to my eyes as a youth of about 5 and 20 to 30 years of age, judging by earth standards and such matters, but he told me he had lived upwards of 60 years on earth. His present appearance was that of his spiritual development, which alone constitutes the age of a spirit. As a spirit grows more highly developed in his intellectual powers, the appearance becomes more matured, till at last he assumes that of a sage, without, however, the wrinkles and defects of age in earth life, only its dignity, its power, and its experience. So, let me finish now, I'll give you my opinion. Thus, when a spirit has attained to the highest possible development of the earth or any other planet spheres, he would possess the appearance of one of its patriarchs and would then pass into the higher and more extended spheres of the solar system of that planet, beginning there as a youth again, since his development compared to that of advanced spirits of those higher spheres would be but that of a youth. So he, I believe, is a little bit incorrect. He's attributing your appearance with your level as a spirit. And that's probably what he has seen so far, but it's not really true. Once you get into the low levels of heaven, you look as you want to look. If you want to look like you're 40 or 50 and have a little gray and look distinguished, you can do that, whatever level you are in heaven, because you look what you think you should look like. If you always want to look like you're 18, you can look that way. They say most people look between their, within the late 20s and 30s and 40s. That's kind of the median of how people look. They say, thus, when people die and they go to heaven. If you're old, you become younger, and if you're too young, you look a little older. Let's say if you died when you're 16 or 17, and you may look like you feel like you are before, because you were on Earth for a short time for probably a very good reason. And then you look older, you go back and you look like you're 25, 29, or 35, whatever you wish. And that happens a lot. I mean, young people will die for a purpose. I know this one pretty well-known medium in Brazil lost a son. I believe he's only like 19 or so. Then the mediums contacted him. He said, look, Dad, you know, I don't think he talked to him directly. We talked to another medium. He said, look, everything was planned. So I am fine. And again, this is what I say when people pass over, be positive for them, because it probably was planned and they're probably extremely happy. Same thing happened to Emmanuel, who was the spirit mentor of Chico Xavier when Chico was alive on Earth. I believe he was born in 1910 and died in 2004. And Emmanuel, who psychographed some books to Chico, he had lived many other lives. Like he psychographed a lot of books, and there's interesting, but the whole trajectory of Emmanuel's life. But to get to the main point of dying young, Emmanuel was born in the late 1800s and died, I think, at 21 or so. The reason he came to Earth was that he could learn modern Portuguese. So when he psychographed his books would be in a style more attuned to what people expected here on the planet Earth, in Portuguese in Brazil in the 20th century. So there's always reasons. So it's not, people, oh, it's a tragedy when someone died young. Well, it's a tragedy if they left earlier than they should have. But and of course that's very unfortunate. Don't leave until it's your time. Otherwise, you're going to have to do it again, and you need to learn lessons that are given to you. So I just want to go over that. So that is what happens. So you don't have to be an advanced spirit to look mature. I'll carry on. Hussein told me that he was at present studying the various powers and forms of nature in those stages which were below soul life, and would be able to make visible and explain to me many curious things we should see upon our journey. Many spirits, he said, pass through the sphere of the astral plane without being conscious of its spectral inhabitants, by reason of the fact that their senses are not developed in such a way as to enable them to be conscious of their surroundings in all their entirety. Just as in Earth life, there are many persons quite unable to see the spirits around them, although to others, again, they are perfectly visible. And of course, I've met people who can see spirits. In fact, in one of the mediums I knew in Rio de Janeiro, he worked in a government office where people would come to the desk in front and ask questions, and sometimes he would go and he'd start talking to somebody, and then someone on a queue next to him would say, "You're not talking to a human." And he goes, "Oh," because he'd be talking to a spirit, and sometimes you couldn't distinguish between a spirit and a human. Same thing with Chico Xavier. One time someone came to him and goes, "Oh, Chico, I'm so happy to see you." He goes, "Oh, I'm happy to see you too, and you brought your mother." He goes, "No, my mother's dead." But of course, his mother was standing right behind him, but she was, a spirit. And so the next time he saw an older lady, he goes, "Are you a spirit?" He goes, "Oh no, I'm alive." He goes, "Oh, thank God." So it's tough. In fact, I know like Divaldo Franco, who can see spirits. So those poor people, it's not easy because they can't drive. Because how can you drive when you see spirits and people are walking across the street and you think you're going to hit someone? So it's not an easy life having that much power. Or that many, it's blessings on one side, but it's not easy. Okay. I'll carry on. There are upon Earth persons who can see not alone the spirits of human beings, but also these astral and elementary beings who are not truly spirits, since that word should be used to denote only those which possess within them the soul germ. Now, when he means the soul germ, he's probably talking about free will, which is when he's talking about spirits now. as people with free will. So there's all sorts of things below that. Now, many of these beings, which we shall see, never possessed any soul, and others again are only the empty shells from which the soul germ has departed. To distinguish between the soul spirit and the soulless astral one must possess a double power of soul sight or clairvoyance, as it is termed. And many who possess only an imperfect degree of this double power will be able to see elementals and astrals, but without being able to distinguish them clearly from the soul enveloping spirit forms. So there are images of people and thoughts floating around in the spirit world, which look like they're forms, but they're temporary. And there's also, they call it vampirism. I think it's into this later, so I don't want to carry on with that right now, where they're kind of parasites. So, but there are many different types of spirits out there. And in this Spiritism literature I've read, I've never read a complete exhaustive list of really what is out there and what is not. But I know there's many different levels. There's different levels of intelligence. There's more like automatons, which control some things, which is, like, okay, you're in control of this part of the earth and make sure the water flows underneath or the sun temperature. And they don't have a great deal of intelligence, although the people above them do, but they're given this job, right? And they don't have a soul of a free will. They are an intelligent application. Okay, so there's a lot there. Let me see where I'm at here. Okay, so hence, much confusion and many mistakes have arisen among these imperfect clairvoyants as to the nature and attributes of these classes of beings. And I don't blame them, because there's a lot. There are 7 degrees of the soul sight found in persons yet in the earth life. And in the next stage of life, the spiritual part, or soul, freed from the gross elements of material life, there will be found 7 more expansions of this gift. And so on in progressive succession, as the soul casts off one by one the envelopes of matter. First the most gross or earthly matter, then succeeding degrees are refined or sublimated matter. For we hold that there can be no such thing as entire severance between soul and matter. That is, so long as it is conscious of existence in any of our solar systems. Beyond these limits, we have no knowledge to guide us, and it is a mere matter of pure speculation. It is only a question of the degree and quality of the matter, which is more or less refined and etherealized as the soul is in a higher or lower state of development. So let me explain this. So he says 7 degrees. So what he's saying is that corresponds to 7 levels of heaven. And in what I use, as the spirits talk to Jivaon, there are 10 levels. But they say this is arbitrary. Different people have different levels. No big deal. And it's not just as if you rise from level 1 to level 2, you then have a certain percentage of matter to energy. It's more of an analog, right? It's more as you carry on and you become more and more energy and less matter. And therefore there's a great range of this. There isn't just like 7 stages. And but he's close enough. But yes, there are different degrees, and as you rise in spirituality and knowledge, you become more and more etherealized, meaning more energy and less matter, your ratio. Of course, here, as he said, here on Earth, we're almost matter. And then if you're down in the lower zone, or purgatory, as they call it, you're less matter than us physical on Earth, but you're certainly more matter than anyone else in the spirit world, right? If you're really down at the low level. So that's why spirits from higher levels can go to spirits in lower levels, and those spirits in lower levels cannot see the other spirits unless they consciously make themselves more dense. Okay. It is of this first stage of earthly consciousness, so life, that I'm now speaking and studying of the clairvoyant sight, leaving till another time the theories and beliefs involved in the study of what has passed before man's present conscious stage of existence, and what may happen when he passes beyond the limits of our present knowledge. And of course, even the spirits who've talking to other mediums say they don't know much about the levels of heaven above around the earth. they're, and they encompass the solar system. They could encompass parts of the galaxy, and maybe one universe, but there are universes. I'll carry on. We find then in the earthly stage of life persons, most often women or very young boys, who are endowed with some or all of these 7 degrees of soul sight. The first 3 degrees are very often found, the 4th and 5th more rarely, while the 6th and 7th are hardly ever met with, except in persons endowed with certain peculiarities of organization due to those astrological influences under which they are born, particularly to those prevailing at the exact moment the child sees the light of earth life. So that is, I don't think that's particularly correct. It's mostly what was planned for them, how organized and how robust was their pineal gland, because that's how you communicate through to the spirit world, and it's not due to astrological influences. Now, there are astrological influences. The planets where they are, but it's so subtle that the science of astrology really can't detect it. But there is some influence by other planets, because everybody is interconnected and everything affects. That's why I think there is some truth to astrology, but I think these people have examples, and I've written articles on that, of astrological charts that are uncannily correct. In fact, I knew one guy who he predicted when he broke his arm as a kid, what arm, left or right, all of these things. And I believe these people are a type of medium that uses astrology, but they have the medium of seeing the future of some people. So I don't discard it out of hand, but I think it's more like weather forecasting. It's really tough to know how these planets are affecting us, because some planets are advanced, some planets are not so advanced. But I think it's mostly the life plan of a person. But these things could affect us. So, okay, so rare are these perfect 6th and 7th degrees that very few possess them. So that's really, very few are very high level mediums. Chico Xavier was a very high level medium. He could read minds. He could put his hand on a magazine or book and know what was there. And also in the attitude of the author, which you can do in the spirit world. He could do many things. And people have said a lot of stories about him. And his power was just amazing. So think of what people thought of Jesus and why people followed Jesus. In fact, it's funny. One of the funny stories is one of the young guys who when he was young, had been working with Chico. He said, it's really hard to work with Chico when you're young, you're adolescents, and your 20s, because you know where your mind is. And Chico would look at me sometime and say, and he says it's, as if he saw like a good-looking woman or something. So he could read minds, and this guy was completely convinced of it. Okay, where was I? So some of them are found with an imperfect 6th and none of the 7th, in which case it can never attain to the perfection of soul sight. Well, never being retained in that life. As with the imperfect glasses, the defect in their sight will cause them to have an imperfect vision of celestial things. And although they'll see into the 6th sphere in a sense, yet their defective power will greatly impair the value of what they see. Those, however, who have the perfect 6th and 7th degrees can take in spirit into the 7th sphere itself, which is the highest of heaven of the earth spheres. Like St. John of old, they shall see unspeakable things. Okay, so he's talking about someone who has sight and spirit can go into whatever degree according to their capability. Now, there's truth to that, but it's mainly according to what the spirit world, where they want to take you, because they can take you to whatever degree they want to. St. John, who did the revelation, and I've done a whole article on that. It's very interesting because he saw things that other people and that the spirits have talked about. And in fact, let me go off target just for one moment here. He talked about the I can't remember the exact word, the flame or the sword that came out of the mouth of people giving orders. And the spirits who are talking to spiritist mediums say there's different ways of communicating. there's mind to mind, right? There is, and then there's also sending images to a person. And they use this way of communication uh, in both, right? They'll send you words and they'll send you a picture, like, oh, meet me at this round rock, and then they'll send you a picture of the rock. So you get everything. But what they say is, when someone sends you a picture, it's like a beam of light comes out of your mouth, just for, like, like a meter or whatever, or a short spot. It's like, so it's like lightning, and it was described by John. And so so when people who say, oh, I don't believe anything about the New Testament, well, I think there's a good data point there for you, is that he saw this. Now, even they say that John couldn't interpret many things, and that's nothing against John, because, I mean, imagine you go in the spirit world and seeing all these things, and there's no time, and seeing these things in past, present, and future, and how can you understand all this? So he says some things he's a little off, but he did as well as he could, right? And so really, is where the spirits want to take you is where you're going, not the fact that you have this innate capability of going to that level of heaven. Okay, to do this, the solar car is freed of all ties of material body, save only the slender thread, without which connecting link, body and soul, would part forever. And they're talking about the paraspirit. And they talk about this, and I also have a video on this one about the paraspirit. It's like an umbilical cord. So when people have NDEs, some people will, some people don't notice it. When they rise from their body, they'll see this silvery cord attached to their physical body. And of course, this cord can go logically infinity. And so that was even found, talked about in the Bible, the silvery cord. Again, that's true. Now, when that silvery cord is cut, that's when you leave your physical body. That's when your physical body says, oh, hey, time for me to decompose. And then you start decomposing. Thus, they may be said to be out of the body at such times. Let me bring this down so people can read it with me. And so difficult and dangerous it is thus to take the soul in the seventh sphere, that only with exceptional persons and under very exceptional circumstances can it be done, even where the power exists. Well, I think it's that usually they don't have to. I think that they could take you there, but they'd really have to prepare you, and that's probably why they don't do this. Of all of the clairvoyants of the lower degrees of power, the same may be said, except that the less celestial their powers, the more safely and easily they may be used. Each clairvoyant being able to see in that sphere which corresponds to the degree of power which they possess. It is, however, a curious fact that many clairvoyants possess one or more perfect degrees of soul sight, with at the same time an imperfect form of a degree still higher. That's because there's no absolute degree. And they'll say there's no absolute boundaries between heavens, right? Between the levels of heavens. And therefore, everything, is the degree. So that's why there's no absolute boundary. Since a defective degree, if used, will act like a defective eye and cause that which is beheld by both eyes at the same time to partake of its imperfection. So it is therefore far better to have the entire absence of a degree than to possess an imperfect form of it, since the imperfect one only causes confusion in using the perfect ones, unless indeed you do with these powers as you might do with a defective eye and close it all together in order that the vision, though limited, may be correct. So again, I understand what this person is trying to tell Franchezzo, but let me give you an example. There was this group of students in the spirit world, and they were in a pretty high level of heaven, I think 5 or 7, I can't remember. And they were learning how to meditate and kind of look in different areas. And so the teacher said, okay, calm down, close your eyes, lay on the grass and tell me what you see. And this one student said, okay, I see this person, and he's sending out orders or something like that. And He goes, but I think it's a lower level, and I'm not sure where. And the teacher put his hand on the head and goes, oh, okay. You're actually seeing a higher level, and that person has another spirit on top of his shoulder. You can't see it because that spirit is so advanced and so bright, therefore you cannot make it out. So when you're a spirit and you're accessing kind of the total universal database, it's hard sometimes for you to know, am I going in higher level or lower level? And of course, and as the spirits tell us, you can't really say, if you know, it's good in some ways. It's good to be able to learn and visualize the earth as the earth, the crust, and below the crust is the dark abyss, above the crust is the lower zone, above that are levels of heaven, and then there's levels of heaven circling the earth, and there's levels of heaven above, you know, like the solar system and so forth. That's a geometrically way of getting that in your mind. But in actuality, if you look at it in a computer science view of data, is that you have permissions to look at certain set of data, and maybe you have permissions to look at read-only data, and you see things from higher levels, even though you cannot travel there because you don't have that, but you can probably interpret things from there. And so it's really a set of permissions where they are. And so you're in, let's say, the third level of heaven, because that's been set in your parameters that you can see the third level and below when you wish to, and direct what you want to see with your mind that sends the applications out that makes the data appear as if it's real to you. So I hope I'm explaining this well. So if you have any questions, please type or send me questions via my blog, NW Spiritism. So it's very interesting. But and to make clear on, there's even mediums. Now, if you read the mediums book of Allan Kardec, they talk about different types of mediums: psychograph, hearing voices, audio, all of these types of mediums. But I had met one medium who did none of those things, and what he did is he went into the database and he would follow data. And sometimes he would misinterpret what he saw, but other times he was like right on. And when you talk to him, you really had to say, okay, what does he know? And how's he interpreting this piece of data? And he'd follow the universal database. Very interesting of how people are. And this guy he's a fantastic person. Okay, where was I? Okay. In the olden days, seers were divided in classes, even as they are among certain schools of province in the East, though the art is not studied to perfection as it once was when the Eastern nations were a power upon the earth. That will come back again. Prophets are becoming more and more important, and they have a place upon the earth in what they tell us. And they could be, say, degrees of power. It could be clairaudio, clairvoyance, you know, so you see, you hear, you're a trance medium, etc. I'll carry on. Each class underwent a special training adapted to their special degrees of power and class of gifts. Correct. There was not the present curious mixture of great gifts and entire ignorance of how to use them wisely, in which many instances result in so many inaccuracies and so much harm both to mediums and to those who go to them for spiritual knowledge. As well might a trainer of young gymnasts think he could overtax and strain the growing muscles without lasting harm to them. As to those who make an ignorant, unlimited, indiscriminate use and development of the mediumistic powers. A young fledgling, cast from the nest too soon, flutters and falls to the ground, while if left till the wings are strong enough to bear its flight, it will soar to heavens itself. Okay, with more extended knowledge upon earth, there will be given to certain insensitives endowed with the needful mediumistic powers, the knowledge by which, under the guidance of those of higher intelligence who are directing the great spiritual movement, they can judge between the spirits of low and degraded states and those of a higher degree of advancement, and thus much of the confusion and danger which still hampers the movement will be gradually eliminated from it. So let me explain this. Try to make this simpler. A medium who has not studied spiritism or is not spiritual, let's say, you don't have to study spiritism per se, but you have to have knowledge of the spirit world, will be visited by spirits of their level. So if you have a pretty ignorant medium, even though they have great mediumistic powers, they will not be communicated to by higher spirits who have higher levels of information to give to them. And that's why you'll see on TV and other places, these spirits, they'll talk to Uncle Joe, who's standing by, Aunt Edith, whatever. And that's the kind of spirits they talk to. But they don't talk to the higher spirits. And for that, you have to study and pray and meditate. And also, like in spiritist centers, I should say, you'll go through like a year of learning, maybe 2 years of reading about spiritism. You'll participate in mediums meetings until you feel like you can judge what level spirit is trying to talk to you. And also, this is important, in spiritist centers, in the mediums, there's a spirit manager which will protect all the mediums and will only allow spirits in that the higher spirits want to, in order for those to be assisted or helped in some way. Now, if you're just at home and you're doing this, you really need to be careful, and you should have other mediums with you, and you should read at least Alan Kardec's The Spirits book and the Book of Mediums. And there's some other books. I have that on my website. You look for mediumship on my website. It'll give you kind of a list of books to read. You really need to understand, because spirits can talk to you and fool you, right? They'll say, oh, I'm the saint whatever, and actually they're not. They're just telling you garbage. And also, you'll learn, it may take many times of talking to them until you finally understand, okay, they're not very high level, because they're telling you stuff that goes against your conscience. They're telling you things like gossip about someone. They're telling you bad things. They're giving you stupid ideas to follow. You have to discern what you're being told. And that's why I understand a lot within the Bible, they say, don't talk to spirits. Well, there's reason for that. But then Spiritism says, yes, we talk to spirits, but you have to have the knowledge. You can't just be this young person who thinks they're talking to spirits. Then you get a lot of trouble, because some spirits can start obsessing you and playing with you and have you doing things that are not good for you. So something to be very careful. I'm not a medium. I'm just telling you what I've seen and what I've heard in talking to other mediums. Okay, I'll carry on. On the spirit side of life are many teachers who for centuries have made a study of these subjects, of all forms of life, and of the mediumistic powers of those who are incarnated upon earth. And they are even now seeking on all sides for open doors through which to impart such knowledge as may be of use to man. Much which they know could not yet be imparted, but there are things which could, and with this subject as well as others, the minds upon earth will expand and develop as knowledge is given. Very true. Now, this is what Spiritism says. As we grow and mature, we will be given more information. And also, since we are starting to be a planet of regeneration, more and more people will start communicating to the spirit world. This will become more commonplace. This will become something where people will talk to spirits in a lot of purviews. So this is people will have more dreams and all that. This will become commonplace. So this, we need to expect it. In fact, we're seeing it now. We saw in the 60s and 70s, and let's talk about Christian evangelicals. There were certain prophets, right? And now, lately, we're seeing more and more. And in fact, I think it may be YouTube helping this, and other like BitChute and other venues, because of course, like YouTube wants to stop any type of spiritual progress. Unfortunately, they'll change eventually, but they're giving us many more prophecies, and they're giving us more information from their point of view. And also in spirit centers, we're getting more messages from spirits, and we've gotten books by Devaldo Franco, who's still alive. Of course, Chico wrote right now almost 500 books. He died when he did about 450, but they've been putting out more books from his writings and messages he got. So there's a lot there. I mean, there's a lot to learn. And the spirit world is complicated. And you can look at it different ways. And that's why I kind of talk about, you can look at it, and it depends how your mind works and how you want to, how you feel comfortable. But the bottom line is this: we are immortal spirits. We are here for a purpose. And our reason to be on earth is to improve ourselves. So that one day we can become higher and higher in the levels of heaven, become less matter and more energy, and graduate to that level above the heavens around the earth. Our goal is to become a perfect spirit. If you want to know what a perfect spirit is, think of Jesus Christ. Okay, let me carry on. I thanked my new friend for his information and promised help, and as the expedition was soon to start, I went to Earth to bid adieu for a time to my beloved. Upon our parting, I shall not dwell, nor say how much we both felt we should miss our constant little intercourse, for even restricted as it was by the barrier between us, it had been a great joy to both. I found on my return that the preparations for a journey were now complete, and I was summoned to bid my father and others adieu, and to join my companions in a great hall, where they are now assembled to receive the farewell benediction of our Grand Master. After this, our band started amongst the cheers and good wishes of the assembled brotherhood. And I believe that is the end of chapter 16. Put that down. So, these are wonderful books that people have sent me, and I found, and a lot of people send me these books. And this is in PDF, A Wanderer in the Spirit Land. I recommend it. And this was done over 100 years ago. So, and it's even more intense. People, they're talking to us. We're getting information. It's extremely interesting. And the spirit world is preparing us for this new era. And to prepare yourself for this new era, this new wave of spiritual emotion, because they can do that. They'll send these waves of emotion. The Renaissance was sent by two main things. Was sent by waves of emotion that make people, okay, let me wake up here. Let me not be wallowed in superstition. And then what they also did is they placed very important people to incarnate at certain critical junctures. Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Machiavelli, to educate people and to teach them to is to prepare the world. And then later on, during the American Revolution, Voltaire, Montesquieu, Emerson, all these people to really, of course, Emerson was American Civil War, to bring the nations up a level by philosophy and science, etc. That's how the spirit world works and guides us. They'll say, okay, and that's what they did. Let's say, well, they even said in the Renaissance, they said, well, they brought a lot of these famous sculptors and musicians and playwrights from ancient Athens, and they put them in Italy. So you're going to have this whole rack of marvelously talented people who are going to make an impact on society. And this is what's happening right now. And I say this is what happened in the American Revolution. You never saw such a group of intelligent people. And you never saw such poor people leading England at the time. England's usually, during that time, before and after the American Revolution, they had pretty brilliant prime ministers, etc. But during that time, they were pretty average and they made a lot of mistakes. And of course, that was all planned by the spirit world. This is what's just so interesting. So therefore, in this spiritually intense era where we are going to, the earth is going to be shaken with spiritual waves, it behooves us to understand who we are, in what context do we place ourselves here, and then what do we decide individually? Because I'm not telling anybody that, oh, you have to do this or you're going to be damned forever. No, never. The Spiritist says, here's information. You make your own decision. And, if you don't believe it, fine. You've got another life to believe it if you want. You'll be back here again or some other planet. But I think it could be very informative to people to really understand the spirit universe. And that's why I brought, I've written 15 books. This is my 15th book, where I try to bring everything together and explain it. And you can go in depth in my other books and then read Allan Kardec. But this one explains the spirit universe, the physical universe, spirits, how spirits are educated, what we are here as physical beings, how we can ascend and prepare ourselves to go back to heaven and become a better person, because that's why we're here. We're here to reform, rewire our brains to become a better person. So I hope this helps you. And if you're interested, read my PDFs I have on my blog site. The book, The Spirit Realm, is available in paperback, Kindle, and it should be on Audible any moment. I put that in. I haven't gotten oh yes, actually I did. I just finished. I just forgot. Yes, it's on Audible now, so you can get that on Audible, and so it's in all sorts of formats for you. And I hope that this will give you some fortification of what you kind of already knew, but it's giving you this logical structure in how we live. And it tells you why there's chaos, why bad things happen to good people and good things happen to bad people. But don't worry, there's karma and reincarnation. It takes care of everything. Just because you don't see justice done, it is done. But the good news is we're coming from this planet of atonement, where there is chaos, and there are, because we have to learn from our mistakes. That's why some good people, terrible things happen to them because they did something wrong in the past. But we're becoming a planet of regeneration where we won't have to go through these trials, these harsh trials. It will be more smoother, more calm, more careful. We will be able to self-direct ourselves more at a higher level than we were on this planet of atonement. And more people will communicate with spirits and seek guidance as we go. And there will be more honesty and justice in the world. So anyway, I want to thank everyone for being part of my live stream. I live stream Sundays and Tuesdays around 5 o'clock Eastern time. So look at me, hit the bell if you want to be notified. And God bless everybody, and I'll talk to you later. God bless.